Copilot in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations apps. My name is Philip Seaton, Senior Solutions Architect, and I will be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live event. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. Presenting today from Microsoft, we have Jared Hall, Principal Product Manager, Christian Aben, Senior Product Manager, and assisting with the Q&A is Jeff Anderson, Partner Software Engineer. And with that, Jared, over to you.
Thanks, Philip, and thanks everyone for joining in the conversation today. We're excited to begin the discussions on how to extend the Copilot in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, and taking that the experiences that are being built into Finance and Operations with Copilot and generative AI, and being able to have extensible experiences for customers and partners to extend and customize those experiences in the application. As by way of introduction, just to call out, the world is changing. As we've seen, large language models and GPTs are changing the way that we interact with our applications. And Microsoft and just in tech world in general, we're changing that model to be able to interact with our applications in natural language, taking advantage of those GPTs and large language models, which is leading to the Copilot model of having a Copilot built into the application. That we have a guide that where we can communicate and ask questions and have that guided experience through the application built in natural language into the application, which is changing our interaction patterns and how we work with our ERP and business data. From a Dynamics 365 perspective, we're all in on Copilots and making sure that these experiences are something that really enhance what you can do with the application in taking that AI and building it into the Copilot experience. So with Dynamics 365, the Copilot across the breadth of Dynamics 365 suite of applications, we have that AI-powered assistance that's being built into the application. For generating ideas and faster content, performing and automating tasks faster, getting insights, and all of this using natural language, being able to communicate with our application data in natural language. Some of the key differentiators that we have from a Dynamics 365 perspective is that GPT-powered Copilot for everyday jobs. We're using Azure OpenAI Service, using the Microsoft stack, built in with security around it, so that we have all of that experience within the scope of your Dynamics 365 environment to be able to take GPT-powered Copilots and apply it to every role within your organization. Having that Copilot experience built in enhances that experience and makes it easier for you to accomplish the things that you need to for your job role. For this conversation, when we say Copilot, we have a lot of surfaces where we can bring Copilot into the conversation. And when we say Copilot, we talk about three main surfaces where Copilots come into Dynamics. The first one is the app sidecar chat, where there's a panel on the sidecar where you're chatting with Copilot and using natural language to communicate. And it's a panel that opens up and you have that conversation. But the second one is the embedded AI that you may be familiar with. We've already seen that there's a collection summary page where we built in AI directly into the application. Another one is the confirmed purchase orders with changes page, where there's AI built into the application and built directly into that experience that you have on the form itself. And then the third one is being able to ask questions of your data directly from M365 chat outside of Finance and Operations, but communicating with your Finance and Operations data. So we have these three main surfaces that you can extend for Copilot, but for this conversation specifically, we're going to be focusing on the first, the app sidecar chat experience, and how you as partners and customers can extend that experience and customize that experience to be able to be more applicable to what you need in your organization. One of the primary benefits of having this sidecar chat experience built directly into the application is that it's enriching those rich contextual experiences. That we have a Copilot panel that's a guide for you in the application. The Copilot, or the vision of this Copilot is that it becomes a guide for you for app functionality and features. It knows what the app can do, and it can answer questions for you on what the app can do, whether it's troubleshooting, whether it's how-to, whether it's the things that you need to know how to do in the application. Copilot can answer those questions. It should also be able to answer questions about your data. And if there are specific questions that you want to ask rather than needing to navigate to a form to ask that question, Copilot should know. We should be able to answer those questions, which we can recommend and perform client actions, and we can automate operations, all with natural language directly in that Copilot side chat panel. And all of this is made available because we're embedded directly in the application, which makes it tied closely in with that Copilot experience, the application experience, and becoming that guide for you in the application. But all these things listed, we're not there yet. But this is a vision of where we're headed with these Copilot experiences, that this will become that fully functional guide for you in the application. But we need to continue to build out the capabilities of Copilot. The Copilot panel is there and has some base capabilities now, but it needs to continue to grow. And that's where we are excited that there's this extensible experience that others can extend the capabilities of Copilot to make sure that as we add capabilities, it becomes more and more functional and more useful for customers to use within the application. So that's the scope of this conversation, is talking about how you can add the capabilities that you need into Copilot and extend that out so that it becomes more and more functional and exponentially more useful for customers to use. Let's start with a view of the architecture of how the Copilot works. Before we get into how to extend it, we need to understand the basic architecture of how this works. The two main components that extend the Copilot are, first, the AI Copilot control that is embedded in the finance and operations application. This Copilot control is the chat panel that acts as the client action executor, that it executes those client actions and manages the communication between finance and operations client and Microsoft Copilot Studio. Microsoft Copilot Studio then becomes a core component of this Copilot experience, that it acts as the AI orchestration for our Copilot experience, and also the extensibility point, where we're adding the core components so that Microsoft Copilot Studio can understand the intelligent orchestration of what needs to happen as users are typing prompts into the client chat panel. So it then manages the conversation history. It understands the intent of what the user is typing into the chat panel, and then executes those actions and sends the responses back into the AI Copilot chat panel, working with the client to make sure that the correct responses are then surfaced to the user in that chat panel. Microsoft Copilot Studio, as it's executing the plugins, as it's executing capabilities and skills and trying to get responses back to the user, it also needs to reach out and run models, whether it's LLMs, large language models, or other AI models, or get data from places. So there's communication with Dataverse, there's communication with external sources, but all of that is managed from Microsoft Copilot Studio to go get that information, run the models, and then orchestrate that and send the response back to the Copilot. So we use the term plugins when we're talking about Copilot Studio, that our primary mechanism for adding capabilities into our Copilot is by adding plugins in Microsoft Copilot Studio. That's the central orchestration. And as we add capabilities, as we teach Copilot how to do new things, we're adding plugins into Copilot Studio that understands how to do those things. A plugin, just by definition, is a reusable piece of code that can perform a specific task or functionality. So when we think about plugins, we're thinking about things that we want Copilot to be able to do. So if I want Copilot to be able to translate text, as an example we'll look at, or do a summary, or get some data, or answer questions about a customer balance, we would add a plugin specific to those capabilities that understands how to perform that task and send that data back to the user in natural language. So if we're answering natural language query, executing workflows, executing some other action, connecting to data, providing guidance, any of these functions that we want Copilot to be able to do, we add a plugin in Copilot Studio that can perform that action and understand the intent of the user as they enter a prompt, that's the plugin that needs to be performed. Just really quickly to demonstrate the concept of the architecture. If I come into my finance and operations client, and I'm chatting with this Copilot experience, let's say, for example, I want to be able to ask Copilot, what time is it? It's just a simple capability, a skill that I want Copilot to be able to do. if I ask right now, it's going out and it's running through my orchestration in Copilot Studio and it can't find an answer. So it goes and checks documentation and comes back and says, I don't know. So at this point, I can't ask Copilot what time it is. If I want Copilot to have that capability, let's see what that experience looks like really quickly in Copilot Studio. We come into Copilot Studio and we're working directly in the Copilot for Finance and Operations apps chatbot, where we can add plugins that add capabilities to this. This is the bot that is deployed with Copilot for Finance and Operations and is hardwired. So any customization that happens to the in-app experience needs to be added as a topic to this specific bot. I can create a topic and we'll say what topic we want this to understand. And what we want this topic to do is send a message to the user that gives the current time. So as this is saving, and we'll then need to publish this, what we're doing is adding that as a plugin or topics and plugins, similar concepts, but we're adding this as a capability into our Copilot experience. We'll publish, and it goes through a publishing process to publish that to our bot. But as soon as this completes publishing, this then becomes a new capability that quickly and easily surfaced in my Finance and Operations app. Then when I ask in Copilot, now it knows a new thing. And that quickly, we've added a plugin in Copilot Studio, and now my Copilot knows how to do a new thing because I've told it that reference. So this is the primary extensibility point, and we'll get into deeper examples. And Christian is now going to look at how we can extend the generative answers functionality for getting documentation over our unstructured data. Christian, go ahead and take control.
Excellent. Thank you, Jared. I like to switch first of all to what we have today in Dynamics 365 Finance Operation app as the Copilot out of the box. So up here, you see this Copilot icon. You open that Copilot icon once Copilot is enabled. And as Serge said, now you can basically ask a question. And let me ask a question about this specific page. How can I analyze warehouse material movements? And Copilot will now consult the documentation. It uses a system called Generative Help and Answers to identify information specific to my question. And here it looked at the documentation. It found a specific source where this is documented and composes a new guide that helps the user to navigate through that page. And what I like to do is I like to show you a little bit what's behind that and how you can customize that. So first of all, we have here the Copilot sidecar, which is connected to a bot. That bot resides in a solution that we have here, Copilot for Finance and Operation apps. And if I look into details for that specific solution, we will find there that there is a Copilot included in here. So it loads the objects in that solution and identifies here that there's a chatbot included. And that's the chatbot Copilot for Finance and Operation apps that Jared just showed before. So we can quickly open that bot here and see what we can do here. So that bot has some information about different topics it supports. One topic is that Jared just created, but there are also out-of-the-box topics in here, right? So there are a number of topics included here. Also, if we look at the system topics, it's called the conversational boosting. That's really the capability that makes up that generative help and guidance topic. But very simple. It's also possible to customize that in a very easy way. We simply go here to the settings and look at the generative AI topic. which is used by our bot to identify information. I can add more information here. So what I can do here, I can upload a document. So in my scenario, I want that Copilot is also able to answer questions about the company. So a procedure document has been created, and that procedure document helps the company employees to follow certain standard operation procedures in that company. So what I've done is I've created a fictitious company, Fabricam, and that is a leader in electrical vehicle. And I have written a document that goes through all the processes that users in that company would do, and it has some additional information about strategic products and strategy in that company. And now when a user goes in here in Copilot and asks a question about Fabricam, tell me about our company strategy at Fabricam. Copilot again looks at all the resources that had been made available to them and also finds that document as the one that has the best information for it. And it summarizes the information from that and gives a brief overview about the company and all the procedures and standards there. And the user can also find more details about that information. So that is the most simple way how to customize Copilot by giving it additional documents that you can upload here. At this point in time, 3 megabyte is the file size limit that you can use in that upload. That includes everything in that document. That's really the document size, but that limit will be lifted hopefully in the near future. I'm waiting for that eagerly to happen. So when we look at a little bit more at the topics included here, and we go back here to this the conversational boosting, we can take a quick look just as an introduction how such a topic is built. So in that situation here, a trigger is called for an unknown intent. So any question that can't be answered by anything else is going to be picked up by Dark Q&A. And then we are using a number of logical operations here to set context. For example, the questions are about finance operations. We give additional instructions in here that the question should be concise and so on. There are information as well available about the documentation language. The documentation language has an impact on which documentation sources URLs to pick. For example, here there's a mapping done between the locale that the user is in, has configured in finance and operations, and to identify the right set of documents which have been localized. And so on, it goes to compose that URL. It then basically uses that for generative answers and gives that as the sources it shall use in that topic, on top of the documents that have been given as well. And then it basically sees whether it receives an answer. If that is not blank that answers, it can commence certain concatenations or formattings to make sure the answer is nicely configured and given out. So that is a quick overview. And I like to show you now how to make a topic, how to add additional information about a topic of your choice into Copilot using the topic customization. So what I've done here, I've created another topic, another generative answer using topic, which basically looks for a keyword like Maui. In this situation, the user can enter a term Maui or any other topic that you imagine you could do as well, and then basically looks in at different sources, sources of your choice. What I've taken here, I've taken basically sources that are public websites. These public websites represent a website about Maui from the tourist organization there and Wikipedia. And basically follows a very simple process like here. And if a user basically goes here now and asks a question about this topic, what the bot does, it moves into the Maui mode. What do you want to know about Maui? I just can type in beaches. I don't have to type in anything specific to Maui anymore. And it sticks to that topic until it has ended this topic conversation. And now here it tells me that Maui boasts over 30 miles of beautiful beaches and so on, which is information it has received from that other website. In a similar situation, you could write a topic as well that is about a very a new module or something that you have in this system and can provide information from a different source in a similar manner like I do. Yeah, that was a very quick view on how to customize Copilot topics that we have in our system, how you can do this in Copilot Studio with a few clicks. And with that, I hand over back to Jared, who will lead us into a much deeper Copilot customization capabilities.
So, Christian was talking through extending generative help, which is that's been a common piece of feedback. Is yes, generative help is awesome if we look at public documentation that's available from Microsoft, but it needs to be customizable because each customer has different processes and has customized documentation that needs to be pointed to. So this is a very valuable piece of extensibility here. Getting into other components of extensibility, I want to get back and look at other examples, just other quick examples of how to extend Copilot. You doing more than just the experience of adding time. So that when we added what time is it, or being able to check the current time, that's a quick capability that's added that's very prescriptive, a prescriptive piece of data that we're sending back to the Copilot. But Copilot Studio is extremely flexible. And in this conversation, where we're not going to do a full extensive view of what Copilot Studio is able to do, I don't think we'd be able to do that in an hour, but we want to start giving ideas of things that you can start thinking about and what you want to be adding into Copilot Studio, or adding into your Copilot in finance and operations using that low-code experience in Copilot Studio. So these are all maker experiences using the Power Platform that don't require a pro-code experience. So just looking at that, a quick example, and this example you may have seen, we published this as a tutorial in our public documentation to give an idea. So the step-by-step is there, but I want to talk through it here just to understand the concepts that are being displayed here. So let's look at what we want to do with, let's say example, we have our courses in human resources that list the internal training courses that employees have to take. And let's say we have this long block of text here, and I want to be able to take this block of text and summarize it using Copilot. Using that generative AI, I want to be able to take this block of unstructured data and create a summary of that text. So I have a plugin that I've created. Maybe I don't. Let's look at the topic that was that I've created, and we'll go back and try that again in a minute. We'll let this warm up. But the topic that was created, summarizing a course description, what I've done is taken that topic of summarize a course description and created an action within this topic that then calls a flow. And the flow does just a couple of things. The first one is getting the course description. So if we clicked out to this would take us to a Power Automate flow that uses a Dataverse connector that calls that, the Dataverse connector connects to that data, gets my course description and brings it back to me in this flow and then sets it to a variable. The next one is my AI action. I've created an action that goes out to Power Automate and uses an AI builder flow or a function that takes the text of that course description that was returned and summarizes it for me. So if we look at this flow, it's a fairly simple, straightforward flow that Power Automate sends this data in, sends in the course description as a piece of text, And then using the AI Builder function, I just have a prompt. And this prompt tells the LLM, tells GPT what I want it to do. And I want it to summarize that text, fewer than one paragraph, fewer than 50 words, without seeing new information. So it's a prompt that explains to the GPT what I want done with that text, and it summarizes it and brings it back. And once that summary is created, we return that back into our Copilot Studio bot to continue the experience. And those are the two actions. We get that back, and then we send that to the user. So fairly straightforward experience for creating that summary. And refresh and hope that there we go. So now it's woken up. It took the text of that, sent it through just as we looked at the flow, and it creates a summary of the course description. Similarly, I can translate the course description using another AI Builder function to translate this text. I get the course description, I send it into the translation, and it translates it into another language and brings it back to me. So I've given it some options to here of which languages I want it to be able to translate into. Let's say Spanish. So my two inputs into my AI Builder function are the text itself and the language that I want to translate it into, the language code, and then it translates it into that language. So we can use several other languages. So let's look at this one. This one is slightly different. We're translating the course description. We're getting the course ID, and I've created an entity that has my list of languages that I want to support, and we get the choice, and then we set the variable. We set our variable and then call that action of getting the course description and then passing in the variables. So if we look at our flow for this, it's simple steps of taking the inputs, translating that, passing in the text that needs to be translated, using the code that it needs to be translated to, and sending it back to our bot, which then sends it back into our experience in Copilot and Finance and Operations, sending the translated text back. One thing that I have added in here is application context. We have in the application or in Copilot Studio in this bot, user context that's available. And there's several pieces of context that are available, such as the page, the user language. I'll provide a list shortly here in a slide, but we're able to build that user context into our bots because they're set as global variables. When I'm navigating through the application, we take certain variables from the client and set those in Copilot Studio so they're available to extend our Copilot experience using the application context, creating those rich contextual experiences that are really valuable in that in-app experience. So this one, just as a quick example, I've taken the language code, and rather than making the user type in the language or select the language, I want to be able to take the client language and say, we already know what the user's client language is. Let's use that as an option for doing the translation. So I've set one of the options to be my language. And if I translate that, then when we set the language code, my language is set to this global variable, and we have a list of global variables that are available. This one specifically is the user language ID, the ID of the language that the user has set in the client, taking that client context and passing it into Copilot Studio to be used for those contextual experiences. Some of the others that are available, let's look at our list of variables. We have our navigation context that provides the list of pages that the user has access to for for context. The page context, what is the name of the page, or a list of properties of the page that I'm on in the application, such as the metadata context, and data area ID, which is a legal entity that I want associated with this that I'm currently logged into, and then the language ID. We'll continue to expand this list of variables that are available, giving more options for contextual experiences as we find the need and as customers and partners make those requests for more context. We don't want to send all context from the client session because it would overload, but as we find those valuable scenarios, like record context is another one that will be coming soon. You'll notice that in my demo, I had to type in the record ID 00003 when it asked me what course description to type for. That experience will go away when we have record ID as the context, because we will know what record I'm looking at. We'll have the identifiers already available, and that experience will go away, that I don't have to tell Copilot that. It just knows what record I'm looking at. In this case, we're looking at language. So I've set my language. So if I come back into Copilot Studio or into Finance Operations, let's change my language. And see how that works with context. Let's go back to our courses page. And even though my client is in Italian, my client language is Italian, the description is still in English. So I want to translate this into my client language. And then the option here would be my language, and it takes the client language from my options and runs that translation. So we should see this translated into Italian, which it does. So if we were to go back and change our client, it then takes it from the client sessions, using the context of the application to create those rich contextual experiences. So this is just a couple of quick examples. This doesn't go into a lot of detail of what you can do with Copilot Studio, because it's extremely flexible in the things that you can do in creating Copilot experiences. But just to highlight the point that we can take it fairly quickly, extending those steps using AI functions to bring AI into the application and communicate with our application in natural language with a low-code experience. We don't have to get into deploying X++ with these. It's all done in Copilot Studio just by adding those topics and extending that out to get the data and run those AI functions across it, bringing it back in to the application. However, we mentioned that this is a low-code experience. Taking that low-code experience, we can extend that out, and we'll have options for a pro-code experience to really run to get into the client code. We'll look at that shortly. But before we get to that, we'll switch back to the slides. I want to discuss quickly concepts of what we went over. In the experience that we just went through, and the examples that we went through, we created topics in our chatbot that were fairly prescriptive step-by-step processes of going and getting the data, and then summarizing the data, and then returning the message back to the user. And we prescribed step-by-step what that process needed to be to send that data back to the user when we wanted that done. This is going to evolve over time, that as we enhance the experiences of our intelligent orchestration in Copilot Studio, we'll be more tightly integrating with generative actions. Using that generative orchestration in the application that can use more of a plugin experience that dynamically chains together the plugins and skills that we have built into Copilot Studio. So we want to think of these things as you're extending the Copilot, as you're building these out. Think of it as individual skills and capabilities that I want my Copilot to be able to do. So the three things that we looked at, for example, are summarizing a course, or getting a course description was the first one, summarizing a course description, and translating a course description. So we think of those as three separate things that Copilot can do. We can rely on dynamic chaining in future releases, as we build into generative actions and dynamic chaining, we'll have that ability to dynamically chain those together rather than building out prescriptive topics that define the step-by-step components. So just to illustrate that point, with the topics, what we showed by creating a topic, we got the course description as an action and then summarized the course description. So if the prompt is give me a summary of this course description, that's the topic that would have answered that question. With dynamic chaining, what we want to do is build three separate plugins, one that gets the course description, one that summarizes text, and one that translates text. And then dynamic chaining will determine, based on the intent of the user, the order in which those things need to be, which plugins need to be called and the order in which they need to be chained together. So in this scenario, if this prompt is entered, it knows to get the course description, summarize the text, and sends it back to the user. I didn't have to define the order in which those things needed to be called or create a separate topic for them. For example, the next example, if the user puts translate this course description into Spanish, I had a separate topic that was created for that specific scenario, get the course description, translate course description. Whereas with dynamic chaining, I had the same three skills already in the bot, and the dynamic chaining understood which needed to be called and the order in which they needed to be called. So this will be the experience that we build into and expand to as that orchestration becomes more and more intelligent, and we have those well-defined plugins with well-defined natural descriptions explaining what that capability does. And then the third one, I would need a third topic for this. Give me a summary of this course description, translate it into Spanish. I didn't have this topic created, but we wouldn't need it if with dynamic chaining, but get the course description, summarize it, and then translate that into Spanish would be done with that. So illustrating the difference between what we have today with topics and where we are headed with the intelligent orchestration of dynamic chaining. So when you're building out your topics or building out your plugins, think of them as these individual skills that you want to be accomplished, jobs to be done, and then think of them in the way that dynamic chaining and orchestration will be able to bring those together. Quickly looking at app context that we talked about in our scenario, these are the items, the global variables that we looked at that are available. But as I mentioned, more coming soon. The current record is an important one that will light up many scenarios of being able to know what is the record that I'm looking at right now. But please let us know if there are others that need to be brought in, and we'll continue to expand that context as needed. So then the next thing we want to talk about is more of the pro code experience. We've been looking at low code, that everything that we did was all done in Copilot Studio in the Power Platform and didn't need a single line of X++ code to accomplish any of that. But there are scenarios where we have a lot of business logic built into X++ that we want to be able to invoke that X++ from Copilot Studio to really make it that bringing context into the client session, into the application experience, but also opening up a lot of that business logic that's already available there to Copilot, exposing all of that X++ to a natural language interface and experience. So the GIF that we see here rolling shows a quick example of changing the client session. This is a quick example of I can communicate in my Copilot chat experience in natural language, and it calls into X++, the client code, to perform a client action. And now this isn't a fantastic example that I think everyone is going to want in their application to change the client code, but it demonstrates well that just in natural language, by typing a prompt, I can control what happens in my client session. And this could be applicable to a lot of different scenarios. This is coming soon in version 10.0.40. So we're a little ahead of the game in telling you what is coming in the next release that's out in public preview in a few weeks. So we're hoping that having this preview of this capability will get you thinking about the scenarios that you will want to build into Copilot using this X++, using the client actions experience so that you can control it, experiences in the application through natural language. So let's look at a couple of examples of what that can look like. And how that can be accomplished. So we're looking at our application. This is my development environment. and we will open Copilot and we'll type in a prompt. This is calling into Copilot Studio. Copilot Studio is the central orchestration for all of our plugins and determining the intent of what I just typed, and then using that to create an event that calls back into my client code. And this environment's a little bit slower than my production environment, but you see that it worked. It called into my code and changed my client theme. So what does that look like? This is what we're doing is we are creating a client action, and actually maybe easier. We'll talk through some concepts here of what just happened. In Copilot Studio, the architecture of how this managed, we added a topic or plug into the Copilot Finance and Operations app. We added a topic that understood the intent of the prompt that I just typed in. And when that prompt is called, we send an event back into Finance and Operations to invoke that X++ code. On the X++ side, we have a class that extends syscopilot chat action. And that makes it an action that we can invoke from Finance and from Copilot Studio to call that and make that a natural language experience for calling that code. Some of the categories of these client actions that are available, if it's happening in the application, we want to be able to define when the action happens. So there are 3 categories of these actions. One is global, that I can, no matter where I am in the application, this action should be available for me to call. It doesn't have any specific application context for me to call. And so the type of action determines the availability of where it is available for the user, depending on their session context. Another one is a form action. If there is an action that only makes sense on a specific form, or it's tied to a specific form action, then you would define it as a form action and define the forms on which it is available by tagging that in your or decorating it with the right tags in your X++ code. And then there are runtime actions. And these ones, runtime actions are available whenever the developer defines that they will be available. So you can add them to a list of availability and remove them from the list of being available at any given time. With the syscopilot chat action, add to Copilot runtime and remove from Copilot runtime actions to define when it is and isn't available. So that it's determining that when that action is available to the end user. So let's jump back in and take a look at what that looks like with how we managed that with changing the client color. This is a global action. It's something that I wanted to be called anywhere in the application, doesn't have any specific form or runtime context. So we decorate it as a global action. When we define these actions, it's important to define the give accurate and descriptive natural language descriptions of what this action is doing. And the reason for that is as we continue to build out and more tightly integrate with generative actions and our orchestration becomes more intelligent, we will be able to use these natural language descriptions of the action and the input and output parameters to understand the intent and link that intent to the action based on the prompt that the user enters here. So it's important that as you're building these actions out, that you have good natural language descriptions of these actions that we can use for that intelligent orchestration as we continue to expand that out in future releases. But then pretty straightforward from here. We have input parameters that we're defining. We define the color ID that we want to change it to as an input parameter, and then we invoke an action. Execute action for the of what we want to have happen, and then we're calling that code. And this is the block where we're extending that X++, whatever that business logic is, whatever that form action, whatever the data is that we're retrieving, whatever it is that we want to have happen at that point, happens within this block and then can be returned to the user. In this case, I don't have any return parameters or output parameters that are returned to the user. Let's look at another quick example where we want to be able to return parameters or return a response back to the user in natural language. So I have another example where I have code where I have a block of code that does currency translations. That it converts currency amounts to a foreign currency based on an exchange rate. So it's a pretty straightforward method that's built into X++, and I want to be able to expose that as a capability in Copilot so that users have the ability to ask Copilot in natural language to exchange a currency amount into an exchange rate. So a fairly simple scenario, but demonstrates the point that we're calling into X++, doing some calculations with that business logic and sending a response back to the user that is returned in natural language in the user experience. So I'm converting a currency amount and I'm defining the currency into which I want to have it converted. So I ran the calculation and the X++ then sent the response back to Copilot Studio, who translated that answer into natural language and returned it to me in Copilot. So what does that look like? We need a little bit more back and forth for this experience. So the components that we have here are, I have created two topics in my Copilot chatbot, the finance and operations chatbot. One is converting the currency. And it's pretty straightforward. What we're doing is we're taking a phrase or a generative description of the capability and converting that value by sending that as a payload, as an event payload to the finance and operations client. So the event name that we have defined in our code is convert currency. And so when this event occurs, we're sending that into finance and operations, and it looks for that event and runs that code using this event payload. This is a well-known JSON object, so we're passing in our input parameters that have been defined in our code. So I'm passing in currency amounts, I'm passing in a currency code that are sent to my business logic. In my business logic, this is the code that I have written. I've defined it as a global parameter. I've given it a good natural language description, and I have my two input parameters. Similar to what we saw with our client theme, we have the input parameters that are given. The difference here is that I also have an output parameter. Based on the response from the running that code to convert that currency amount, I want to send the response back to Copilot Studio. So we have to also define an output parameter. And then we have the logic that's being run. I'm calling into my currency converter with my input parameters. I get my response back, and that converted value is then sent back as my output parameter. The output parameter then, that's the second topic that was created here, is accepting the currency response. That we then receive that event as the trigger. We're not triggering from a phrase like we would typically do. We're triggering this topic based on that same event being that was defined, coming back into Copilot Studio. We're parsing the value that gets responded, and we send a message back to the end user. So this is just sending a message to the user, but this could you could expand this out using the full breadth of Copilot Studio functionality to run additional business logic, to run AI models, to do whatever you need to on that data that's taken from X++, and then return that back to the user. This could be expanded out using the flexibility and breadth of functionality of Copilot Studio. So this was a really quick overview of those capabilities that are coming, of being able to extend all of your X++ business logic into Copilot to be able to communicate with your finance and operations business logic in natural language. And there are a lot of applications of where this could be useful, of communicating with data, of automating action, of using AI models on your experiences in finance and operations to extend that out. And we're really excited to see the creativity of what the customers and partner community come up with on how you're going to use these capabilities and building out and extending Copilot to communicate with your application in natural language. Finishing up, just a few more quick things to talk through. One of the things to note is that as we continue, things that are coming, one of them is headless actions for X++. So the demos that we just looked through are looking at client scenarios where you're running client actions of things that can happen in the application. But some of these, for X++, isn't necessarily, some of that business logic that's there isn't necessarily tied to what you're doing directly in the application. You may want to take some of that X++ business logic and expose it in places like M365. So if you want to take that currency converter code that you already have written, or you have some other code that's written as a method in X++, and I want to be able to ask that question from M365, from a Teams chat, from Outlook, from some other Copilot experience, this is the next phase of that, is being able to take that X++ business logic and expose it headlessly in other Copilot experiences. So I can ask those questions. I can invoke those actions, like approving a purchase order from an Outlook email. Could call into X++ code to perform that task, and being able to do that in a user-secure way. Stay tuned for that functionality, because more information will be coming soon on what exciting stuff will be coming in this direction as we continue to open up X++ to these Copilot experiences. In addition to that, other things that we were looking at with client, notice that we're creating those topics again. As we get deeper into those generative actions, as we get more tightly integrated into generative actions, these X++ methods that are being created for Copilot actions won't require you to create those specific topics. We'll integrate directly with generative actions. So all of that experience can happen of opening up that X++ business logic and tagging it and following through with the solution management of deployment, all following X++ without the additional solution management of Copilot Studio. So we'll have both a pro code experience in X++ and continue to have a low code experience in Copilot Studio for you to create those low code experiences like we talked about earlier in the session. Related to that, solution management, all of the components for Copilot Studio are solution aware. So as you build out these new plugins, as you build out these new topics, these are solution aware, and you can add them to a solution with dependencies on that Copilot in Finance and Operations apps chatbot. Just add them to that so you can follow standard ALM functionality for importing and exporting all of the customizations that you do. So you can put them in different environments or export them to customers, or however you want to manage that experience. All of that can be done in a solution-aware way. On the X++ side, for the experiences that we talked through, follow your standard ALM for X++, and that will continue to get easier as we continue to build out this functionality beyond what is coming in 10.0.40. So lots of exciting things to come. This is the beginning, but we want to get this out there so that you have the ability to really start extending and playing with this functionality to figure it out. We're in a new frontier of this ALM and AI model of copilots, and we want to make sure that our customers and partners are taking full advantage of these features and extending it to make sure that it is customized and extended to meet the needs that you have for your organization. And with that, we have a few minutes left. So Philip, I will turn it back to you and see if we have any hot questions that we want to go through.
Thank you, Jared. We've got about 3 minutes, so we can take one or two. I'd like to call out from the chat before we sign off for the day. So I think the first one that would be good to address is availability. If someone could speak to where where the Dynamics Copilot features are currently available and a general roadmap or timeline of when it might be available globally?
Christian, do you want to take that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I can take that. So the Copilot for generative help and guidance at the moment is in public preview and available in Europe and in the US. We have, I think, 7 languages right now. We are striving to expand that capability as soon as we can. Certainly when we go GA, we want to have that in a broader available. Other capabilities like the procurement workspace is broadly available, also in more languages. So it depends. I recommend there is a report that you can look at that reports about all the Copilot capabilities. That is public. I shared a link in one of the replies here in the live Q&A. There you can filter by, for example, Dynamics 365 supply chain management and identify the Copilot capabilities and see where the availability has been stated. I hope that helps.
Oh, that's great. And one last question. As we were talking about pro code, I think it'd be important to clarify what sort of environments support the sidecar extensibility.
Oh, good question. So for developing for Copilot experiences, you would need the UNO development environments, the new development experience that it's a unified environment between finance and operations and Power Platform. So we can share the documentation on that development experience. Jeff, feel free to add more detail there if needed.
The links for the unified developer environments preview have been shared in the Q&A. So just follow those and they'll show you how to get the environments, how to set them up.
Okay, great. Well, that takes us to our hour. Again, many thanks to our presenters for this wonderful material presented today.